Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
First, a word from our sponsor. The Daily Compliance News for November 18, 2022, the Worst Controls Ever edition. And we begin with that story as the new chief at FTX says that these are the current internal controls at FTX were the worst he's ever seen. He was quoted as saying, quote, "Such a complete failure of corporate control he had never seen." And he listed a series of unacceptable management practices, including the use of unsecured group email to access sensitive data. Now, the thing about this statement is it comes from John J. Ray III, who ran Enron in its bankruptcy. So I'd like you to think about that for a minute. Over 20 years ago, when Enron filed for bankruptcy, the guy who ran that said it was the biggest shit show he'd ever seen. Now, 20 years later, and we've got an even bigger one. So lots to unpack with FTX. I'm sure we'll be visiting about it again. And that story came to us from the New York Times. Next up, from Patricia Hurtado and Greg Farrell and Bloomberg. Alan Weiselberg, the former CFO at the Trump Organization, tells the jury he and others created tax fraud and the Trump Organization saved millions because of the tax fraud. So pretty dramatic, not revelation, but admission by the former CFO. Of course, he's trying to avoid significant prison time. Nevertheless, now we've got direct admission by the CFO, and the Trump Organization has really not answered any of this. Next up, in a deliciously ironic story from the South China Morning Post, the head anti-corruption chief at China's top spy agency admits to taking bribes. Yeah, the anti-corruption chief admits to taking bribes. So Louis Yangping admitted to taking nearly $33 million in bribes from a, quote, political clique for various illegal actions. So the Chinese anti-graft campaign continues. And our final story comes to us from the Wall Street Journal, which relates that Russia sanctions evasions are becoming more ubiquitous. So check out one or more of these stories today on the Daily Compliance News. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.